Hello, I'm Dr. Black, and I will be covering the syllabus for the multicultural class for this semester. So you can see my information here. My cell number is listed in the Canvas shell if you need to text me or call me. I've had students text or call in the past, and sometimes that can be a faster way of getting hold of me if you really need something answered immediately. I am at work during the day, and so usually I try and answer in the evenings. I am on the East Coast, so I'm several hours ahead of you guys if you guys are physically located in New Mexico at ENMU. I try and respond to emails within 24 to 48 hours. Sometimes, during the week, things get a little busy, and so sometimes it might end up taking me a couple days longer to respond, in which case I try to respond over the weekend. If you want office hours or if you want to meet with me, that's going to be virtual because I'm not physically located in New Mexico. And so that can either be Zoom or a phone call, whatever your preference is. If there's something that you need to show me though, like if you're asking something about an assignment, it's probably going to be easier if you decide to do Zoom than a phone call. Here is the text that we'll be using. I don't think this is the most up-to-date text, but this is the one that I used the last time I taught this class, and so I just kept it the same. But there is a newer version. I forget what edition this one is, but there's now I think this is edition 8 maybe, and now there's edition 9 out. So if you want the new edition, that's fine. It's probably going to be a little bit more expensive. And so you would just, if there's page differences or if they've moved the category, like whatever that, if they've moved the chapters around, you would just pay attention to what is the chapter that look at the syllabus, find which chapter we're covering, and then you would use that if there are any differences in terms of, them moving chapters around for the newest text. We'll be using Canvas, so make sure that you're familiar with how to navigate Canvas, click around in there, make sure that you know how to find discussion posts and questions and assignments and that type of thing. Here is this course description. I'll let you guys read over this on your own. Here are the learning objectives. I don't need to read to you. You guys know how to read. So just read through that on your own. Of course, this is a diversity class, so we'll be covering multicultural factors and aspects as part of this class. There is no attendance per se. Your attendance is going to be scored essentially through discussion posts. So if you miss discussion posts, you'll miss points. But that's what's considered your attendance for this class. Since it's an asynchronous class, we don't meet at all in person or via Zoom through this class or for this class. You can see the course expectations in terms of breakdown. So there's going to be a lot of discussion posts because that focuses on your attendance, but it's also, when classes are online, it can be difficult to get interaction in terms of, there's no group assignments or that type of thing. So this is how you guys interact with each other. Make sure that you're being respectful of each other, but also open to different views and approaches and ideas. Discussion posts need to be 200 words, and then you do need to comment at least a minimum of 50 words to a peer or someone else in the class. That 50 words can be broken up. So if you make 2 posts, comments to a peer that are, oh, there are balloons happening. I never know what hand gestures are going to make something weird happen on the screen. If you make 2 different responses to a peer and one is 25 words and the other one is 25 words, that hits the 50-word minimum. If you are, sometimes what students will do is they'll only post a discussion post, but they won't comment to a peer, then you're going to end up losing, 1.5 points if you're not commenting to peers. 1.5 points might not feel like very much, but over the course of a semester, it does add up. And so make sure that you're meeting the full requirements for discussion posts of posting 200 words or more and commenting to peers so that you're not losing points there. So there's only 3 things for this semester. One is the discussion post, which we just talked about, and then your midterm is pretty heavily weighted, and your final is pretty heavy in terms of the points allotted for that. This is, I don't know, I think that this is a fun assignment. There's 2 parts to it, if you will. The first part is cultural factors, and then the second part is incorporating or applying that to a movie. So you're going to pick a culture. You could pick any culture that you want to. It could be, Japanese, it could be Korean, it could be a European country. And you're going to discuss different cultural factors for that country or that culture. And so let's see, let me cover some of that. So you're gonna start off by covering a uniqueness aspect. And you can see how each one of these different topics has points that are allotted towards it. So for example, I gave an example. You get, anyways, moving on. New Mexico. So I never lived in New Mexico until I was stationed there. And New Mexico has hatch chilies. That's a cultural thing. That's something that's very unique to New Mexico. I'd never heard of hatch chilies. I don't think I'd ever had or tried hatch chilies until I moved to New Mexico. And that's a thing. Like, you guys really love your hatch chilies. So that's something that's very unique to that culture, that's unique to that state. So that's something that you can talk about for whatever culture that you're considering. For Japanese and Asian cultures, a unique factor that would be considered is they like to be very cute with everything, right? So they're very they like cute little things. They like cute little knickknacks. They're often very aware or cognizant of what their facial features look like, and that it's cute. All things cute. That they dress cute. It's a whole thing. Something else that maybe I would talk about in terms of uniqueness for some of those cultures is anime or manga. That's very unique to that culture. So that's a couple different examples there. Then you're going to move into other different topic areas. I won't get into those here, but you can read what the requirements are, what you need to be covering here in terms of cultural traditions and holidays, leisure. How does this culture spend their time, their free time? What kinds of sports are they into, if they're into sports, or if they have developed a sport at some point in time. For leisure, we traveled to Vietnam back in August, and like a way that they spend leisure is they'll go to a cafe or a coffee shop, and cafes and coffee shops were almost always packed. People were just hanging out there, spending time with friends. That's a way that, like, I could see, okay, this is how they spend a lot of their leisure time, just hanging out at coffee shops. And so kind of tap into some of those cultural factors. Those that can be a lot of fun to explore and talk about and discuss. Art and food. Food is it doesn't matter what culture. Food seems to be a huge piece of that. Art oftentimes is also a huge piece of it, and that could be, you could focus on the music, you could focus on dance, you could focus on theater. When we were in Vietnam, we went to a theater show. We didn't understand anything because it was in Vietnamese, but it was a lot of fun. It was like this water show. You could find some YouTube videos online, so that was a lot of fun. What does the workplace talk about? I covered this in chapter 1, or the first lecture, in terms of paying attention to what's the organization, what does the work life look like? Is there a healthy work-life balance? Are people overworked? Anyways, you can get into that. And then the last piece, which is really important for this piece, is this first section of the assignment is the media. So incorporate either 2 current news articles or social media examples of how this culture or this population is portrayed in some type of social media aspect. Don't pick a movie, because the movie is the second part of this assignment, but either the news or, say, Facebook or Instagram or something like that. How is how are they portrayed? What does that look like? Because such a huge piece of how we get information nowadays is either social media or news. And so again, what does that portrayal look like? Before I go into the next part, let me back up a little bit. So this is a presentation. And so what you want to make sure that you're doing is presenting it either in PowerPoint or Canva online is really popular. Canva, not Canvas, is really popular right now. Prezi was really popular when I was a student. So there's several different options. Just kind of pick one and make sure that you're presenting information through there. You need to have some type of visual aspect for this presentation because it's a presentation. Okay, so the second part of this is then now picking a movie and picking a minority character from that movie, and then going through how is the character or characters that are minorities portrayed? What does that look like? Are they viewed in a positive way, in a negative way? How are other, characters within the movie treating that person or that character or that minority group? What is their identity? So we'll cover several different identity models throughout the semester. And so apply that to this client or to this cultural group. What are stereotypes? So give one or two stereotypes from the movie that that minority individual character or group is experiencing. What are some cultural factors? Now you can pick cultural factors that you just covered at for the first part of this assignment, or you can pick other cultural factors. It's up to you, but apply one or two examples, either that you've seen from the movie or that, as I mentioned, that you saw from the first part of this assignment. And then, of course, bringing it back to therapy, how, if you were to work with this specific therapy client or this specific group, what would therapy look like? How would you approach them? How would you consider and incorporate cultural factors? What would that look like? And then lastly, we've got the presentation format. So I already talked about this a little bit. It either needs to be PowerPoint or Prezi or Canva, or some type of visual aid needs to be present for a presentation, because presentations are usually have some type of visual formatting to them or visual aid to them, slide deck, something like that. For credit, this does have to be an audio or video recording. So I've had students just submit, a PowerPoint without any recording or without a video, like of them actually presenting. You actually have to present. You can't just submit PowerPoint slides and call it a day. You'll get a 0 if you submit PowerPoint slides where you haven't done some type of audio or video presentation. Nowadays, it's very easy. PowerPoint, I think they might have recently updated some things because doing video recordings through PowerPoint is very easy. And then, so your points here will be considered in terms of presentation, in terms of how you present, and in terms of how much effort you put forth. So if you just do the bare minimum, that's going to show, and you might lose some points there. So that's your midterm. I know it's a lot, but there's a couple different ways that you can do this. So you can spread this out. I would strongly suggest starting early in terms of creating this assignment and developing it, as opposed to procrastinating and waiting until the last minute. Please let me know if you have any questions about this assignment and the fact that there's two different pieces, or what needs to be covered for this assignment. And then next we have the cultural self-analysis piece. So this is also a presentation. I thought about making it a paper, but I figured maybe it would be easier to just have it be a presentation instead. And so again, right, I talked about that balancing act. The midterm is really focused on someone else's culture, or a client from a movie. This assignment, the cultural self-analysis, is really focused on you. Who are you? Where did you come from? What's your background? What's your history? What's your story? And so again, you can see how there's different factors that are going to be covered here. Were you raised religious? Were you raised spiritual? What is your family history of that? What does that look like for you? What's your age? What's your accessibility? So people will talk about being older or being younger. And if they're older, sometimes they might be treated a certain way because they're older, or if there's any type of, other able-bodiness or that type of thing. What does that look like if you're neurotypical, etc.? And then wrapping up with like personal relationships, what are your relationships with friends, with family? What are the social cultural aspects of that? What does that look like for you? What does that look like for your family? Are people estranged? Does everyone get along? What are the social norms or traditions for your family? So there's a lot to cover in this assignment. But again, this assignment shouldn't be too difficult because it's focused on you and who you are. And a lot of times when students do it, it looks like a lot of work up front. But as students go through and explore, they often realize that there's a lot about their family that they didn't know until they started asking parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles. And so it can be a fun assignment just to explore who you are, where you came from, where your family came from, etc. And then because it's a presentation, the same presentation formatting applies as the previous assignment. Here's how course grading is broken down. I try and grade within 1 to 2 weeks. I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. Modification, typically I don't tend to modify the syllabus, but if something comes up, I'll send out an email or post that in the campus announcement. Late work, so this is something I tried last semester and it worked out really well. So this is essentially we're all human, life happens. So when you are looking at the syllabus, and when you're looking at Canvas, there will be a due date, and then there will be like essentially it's no longer available date. So for example, for this discussion post, it's due the 21st of January, but then you have until the 28th to still complete it. So you have kind of a 7-day window where it's technically considered late, but you won't receive a penalty for it. It's like a best buy deadline. Bread or milk is best buy the state, but you can probably still drink it or eat it a couple days later and you'll be fine. Once that second date passes though, once that like no longer available date passes, you can't submit homework or assignments past that or discussion posts or whatever it is. Past that 7-day extension or time frame, anything past that will receive a 0. So essentially it's, hey, you had, all of this time leading up to that due date, and then you got an additional 7 days past that due date. If you can't get stuff submitted within that time frame, reach out to me, send me an email, or shoot me a text or something. If something comes up, obviously like COVID, right? People get sick, etc. So try and plan ahead as much as possible, or try and communicate ahead as much as possible. Sometimes people are, say, moving in the middle of the semester or something like that. So if you know that something is going to come up and you know that you're going to miss that 7-day extension window, reach out and maybe we can work something out, or maybe, I might give you a little bit of extra homework or, something like that, so that you're not completely getting a 0 and losing those points. But as much as possible, if you miss that 7-day window, then more than likely you're going to end up getting a 0. The only two things, so this applies for discussion posts. This does not apply, let me be very clear, it does not apply for the midterm or the final. The midterm and the final is due at the actual due date. And that's because I then have essentially 7 days to turn around and submit midterm grades and final grades to the school. And so if you if you don't submit something until 3 days later, now I essentially have, 3-4 days, depending on when you submit it, to not only grade, but also get that submitted to the school. So that's why the midterm and the final are both due on the actual due date. Make sure that you pay attention to that, because you don't want to accidentally miss that deadline thinking that you have, the life happens policy or the best buy deadline, and then actually miss the deadline, because, if you go back, those are a lot of points that you're going to end up missing if you're not able to make that deadline. Everything has to be submitted by May 5th. That's the beginning of finals week. And that's because, again, I have to grade everything for an entire class and get grades submitted to the university about a week after that. And so that just makes sure that students aren't still submitting stuff on a Friday when I need to get everything submitted to the school by Sunday. If you look at, all right, so let me know if you have any questions about that. Let's move on to the course organization and schedule. So I won't read this to you. You guys can look at the breakdown and see how things are scheduled. I tried to make sure that you don't have anything scheduled like a discussion post the week before midterms. That way you have a little bit more time to focus on that presentation. And then I did the same thing with the cultural self-analysis presentation at the end. You don't have a discussion post the week before. That way, again, you have a little bit more time to focus on that leading up to the final. And then you can see here, there's several documentaries that we'll end up watching, and that will be The discussion post will be oriented to those documentaries. There's a lot of really interesting stuff and information out there. So you can see that there's a couple of those incorporated within throughout the semester. And that's because I find them very fascinating. I think it's a lot of great information and content. And it kind of breaks up the class so that way you're not just listening to me over and over for, 16 straight weeks. So we'll cover some of that content. And then that's pretty much the bulk of the class. Of course, make sure that you have academic integrity. Don't plagiarize. If you're using ChatGPT or some of those AI generated content tools, you need to find, that is considered academic dishonesty if you're submitting that. So you need to find, sources when you're um, presenting or when you're submitting coursework. You need to find sources so that way it's not considered plagiarism or you're not essentially stealing someone else's work. So make sure to cite your work. Please cite your sources. This should be highlighted in yellow to, again, make sure that you're not being dishonest or engaging in any type of plagiarism or cheating. The school, of course, supports individuals who are other abled or neurodivergent. So if you've got some type of accommodations, usually someone sends those over to me so I know who has those. But a lot of times it doesn't apply for this class because, we're not doing quizzes or tests. So a lot of times there's not stuff that you need extra time for. And then I'll let you guys read through some of the rest of this on your own, and that covers the syllabus. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns.